All right, thank you everyone for joining. This is our third conversation in a series of Action Cluster Spotlights. My name is Adam Martin, and I'm working with US Ignite and NIST on this Global City Teams Challenge program. So what we want to do today, as with all of these discussions, is to first give Action Cluster teams the spotlight so we can get to know more about your exciting projects, and also give you a platform to hone your user stories and tell your story also to a larger audience, to media and potential partners that might be out there. And we also want to cultivate a community of sharing best practices to try to provide more helpful tips and guidance to this growing community, especially some of the newer project teams that might be just taking shape and looking for insights on how to pull together one of these multi-stakeholder projects. And this recorded webinar is one tool that we have to do that, but we also connect people through the globalcityteams.org website, and one-on-one through calls and email introductions and occasional email outreach to the larger community. In terms of agenda for today, I'll just quickly give a background on US Ignite and the program and talk about the upcoming Tech Jam briefly. Then I'll turn it over to our team leads here who've graciously given their time to talk about their projects for about 5 or 7 minutes each. And then I may ask a few follow-up questions after they talk, and then lastly we'll open it up to anyone joining us live for questions, and we'll discuss some a bit about best practices and pull back the curtain a little bit on their process and how they scoped out projects, potential pitfalls that they've uncovered, maybe some tips on how to manage the project practically, and then we'll open up the floor by unmuting everyone. So if you are not sure about your microphone settings, go ahead and kind of mute yourself, and so then when I unmute everyone, we don't get a lot of background feedback. Just taking a quick step back then, for those of you who don't know us, I'm going to quickly introduce US Ignite and the Global City Teams Challenge. The US Ignite is foremost a convener of public-private entities dedicated to accelerating next-generation applications in gigabit broadband communities and the Internet of Things. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and it grew out of initiatives by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the National Science Foundation. And the team has deep experience leading public-private partnerships and works with partners in industry, academia, government to identify and share best practices and resources in these areas. And we have Joe Cochin and Bill McGuire also on the call from US Ignite in case you have general questions about the program that you'd like to direct to them as well when we open it up later. And US Ignite has several partners and initiatives, but most importantly for today, obviously, is the partnership with NIST and Dr. Saku Rhee, the Associate Director of Cyber Physical Systems at NIST. Dr. Rhee, with US Ignite's help, has built this Global City Teams Challenge out of his vision for government as a playground, which is a growing idea that government's not just about carrots and grants and sticks with rules, but there's actually a third way of interacting, and that government can create interesting, safe, open space where stakeholders can come together, bring their tech toys, and innovate and iterate together. And the Global City Teams Challenge is version 2 of last year's Smarter America Challenge, convened by Dr. Rhee when he was a White House Innovation Fellow. And the main goal is really to demonstrate Internet of Things applications that are tied to explicit value for citizens every June in sort of annual June demo day cycle. And the idea is by convening and publicizing these teams across the different stakeholder groups, this can help accelerate the development process and also help identify standards that might need to be developed to further accelerate. And the program is a partnership among multiple federal departments: Transportation, Energy, Health and Human Services, ITA, and of course the National Science Foundation, which has a particularly targeted grant program and funding opportunity that ended recently. Among other things, US Ignite provides this online portal, as I mentioned earlier, to help discover and interact with various stakeholders on these teams. And so far, we have about 40 action cluster teams that are various stages of development, and new ones keep getting added, including about 5 or 6 more in the last month or so. And we continue to welcome new submissions and help and can help you guide you through the process. Key dates coming up, obviously the Tech Jam is the next big event for us in Gaithersburg on the 12th and 13th of February, where the events will start around 8 or 8:30 and go till 5 on the 12th, and then it'll be a half day from about 8 to 1 on the 13th. And we'll also have a reception on the 12th in the evening at the Montgomery County Innovation Center. So the Tech Jam, if you're new to this, and really everyone is sort of getting the agenda now for the first time as well, so some of this might be new for anybody who's involved, but you know, the point of the Tech Jam is to really hear about some of these funding opportunities that are targeted towards these types of applications from NSF and Department of Transportation, hear from some other IoT leaders in the private and public sector, as mentioned on the slide, and then to connect with each other and to hear about each other's updates and learn from each other and potentially get new partners and invite new stakeholders and interested parties to come and pitch their ideas to either join a team or maybe even create their own during this time. We're looking forward to that a lot, and if you haven't registered, you can see the link, that bit.ly link there on the slide, Tech Jam Register, to take you to the page that you need to go to register. So enough from me, and let's introduce our guest panelists today who've taken time to discuss with us their projects. And first we have Skip Newberry with a more location-driven or sort of city-based team that started their journey with us in September at our kickoff event, and their project focuses on smart transportation activities in an urban corridor in Portland, Oregon. And then second up, we'll have Dr. Kamesh Nah Midori from the University of North Texas with a more university sort of research-based approach and perspective with his team, who joined in late November under the banner of the GCTC program. And his project focuses on advanced wireless applications that are geared towards disaster preparedness and public safety. So two very different types of projects, and hopefully continue to give us a mix of perspectives on pulling these things together and under the program. So first, I'll quickly introduce Skip as I turn over the screen to him as well. Let me just find his name real quick. All right, making you the presenter, Skip. So Skip's a recovering corporate lawyer. He was a corporate and IP lawyer and entrepreneur, actually, in his previous lives. He's currently, though, the president of the Technology Association of Oregon, which is dedicated to supporting technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship at a regional level. He also serves as vice chairman of the directors of the Technology Councils of North America. And before his current role, he served as the Economic Development Policy Advisor to Portland Mayor Sam Adams. And there he helped create Portland's first comprehensive economic development strategy in 16 years, and of course recognized software as a key industry cluster for economic development. And also while at the city, he supported other innovation ecosystem projects like the development of the Portland Seed Fund. So I believe I've made you the presenter, Skip. If you are seeing a pop-up on your screen to show your screen.
All right, let me just take, there we go. Cool, let me just pull up, hang on one second. I think I just lost my presentation. Hang on one second. There we go. All right.
There we go. Yeah.
Can everyone see my slides okay? All right, great. So yeah, this is an update from a presentation that I gave during the kickoff event back in late September, early October. And thank you, Adam, for that introduction. So we're focused on a smart, intelligent transit project here in Portland, Oregon. We're specifically looking at a corridor around Southeast Powell, which is a street that runs kind of in an arterial fashion, connecting one of our outer east side neighborhoods into the city's central core. And it's an interesting test bed because it has a mixed-use commercial corridor along with residential and educational institutions along it. Has some congestion problems. It has some interesting assets in place, including fiber that runs up and down the street. There's some connected traffic signals as well as Bluetooth sensors, in some cases deployed along that corridor. And I'll forward to some slides in just a little bit that show you a little bit of a makeup of the test bed from a sort of bird's eye view standpoint. We're looking at two things in terms of outcomes with our project. We're looking at a sort of a congestion reduction plan where in looking at vehicle location data in real time collected from the sensor network, we can adjust the signal timing to reduce congestion points, especially for buses and other vehicles that are traveling along the corridor. A related outcome is a correlation with air quality improvement, both looking at CO2 and particulate emissions. And so we'll be tracking both from setting a standard in the region about where currently the particulate and CO2 emissions are going and at what times during the day through an air quality sensor network that we'll be deploying with Intel in that area. And once we have that benchmark, that baseline, we'll then be running a series of experiments over the course of the spring looking at different ways that if we change the signal timing, reducing congestion points, what corresponding impact does that have on both the CO2 and particulate emissions throughout the corridor. So those are the two main areas of focus. We are also looking at potentially adding a third area that would be a separate action cluster so that we'd have essentially three focused on the same IoT backbone and intelligent transit core to this project, and that would be health and wellness. So if you think of active forms of transit like bikes and pedestrians that are also using this mixed-use corridor, we could potentially also look at what kind of an impact health-wise do these experiments with regard to signal timing and air quality have on people who are walking and biking through the corridor as they're getting exposed to CO2 and particulate emissions. We've added a couple of people to our project team just in the last week. They're going to add some expertise here from both Oregon Health and Science University as well as from an organization that actually is set up to focus on impacts to health related to transit. If you can think of an idea for an organization or a nonprofit in Oregon, chances are it exists. And so not surprisingly, we found one here. So we're pretty excited about potentially having a potential third action cluster that is going to be developed as part of this. Now, whether we can get the third one in place and the experiment completed by June remains to be seen, but we're confident with the first two. In terms of partnerships, City of Portland, Portland State University, TriMet, which is a transit agency, and also a number of private sector partners, including IBI, the Technology Association, NetCity, Intel, and potentially Verizon as well. In terms of major tasks, we've already done a process of inventorying infrastructure and identifying gaps in resources. We've also looked at financing and feasibility. And at this point, we're really looking at, beyond securing commitments, we're really focused on standardization and usage of data. We have some IGAs already in place, intergovernmental agreements between local governments, the city, TriMet, Metro, from a previous project called Civic Apps for Greater Portland, which was an open data initiative. So we'll be building off of that framework and incorporating a new data portal from Portland State University into the mix. They have a transportation-related data portal that they've been maintaining for years, and our next step is to integrate that with the resources the city has with its open data platform, and then see if we can start to create additional standardization. And so one goal by June is to make sure that with the data we're collecting from these sensor networks, that it's in a format and that it's standardized to such an extent that it'll be relatively easy to invite in people from the technology community and from the broader community to create applications and other ways of visualizing the data, both in a meaningful way for policymakers as well as for broader constituents. At a high level, if we're successful with these projects and the experiment, our goal is to continue on beyond June and develop new ways to engage a broader section of residents and businesses that live in that commercial corridor so that they can impact their behavior with the use of real-time data and other types of information that will help them to change their commute patterns and also potentially take different routes or forms of transportation, again, creating an impact for the community that's hopefully positive. In terms of the thing that we have remaining to do this spring, we're looking at deploying the sensor networks, and I'll get to that in just a minute in terms of the timeline for the equipment, and then we'll be running the experiments and reporting out in June. Moving to the next slide. In terms of impacts, benefits, we've covered a little bit of these. Reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, more efficient transportation system, and potentially, if we can work in the third action cluster, increased health benefits to those who are doing active forms of transit. In terms of the demonstration scenario, as I mentioned, we're going to leverage fiber that's already there, deploy sensors, and collect real-time data on both congestion and air quality. We're going to complete the project by the end of May. In terms of the equipment timeline, which I referenced, we are today deploying both the air quality sensors that Intel has developed and in some cases is already deployed in part of Portland. And then this next month we'll be looking to incorporate the next phase of that. By March we'll have deployed both the sensor networks and the platform. And then by the summer we hope to have completed all of it, including the collection of data from the network. Looking ahead to air quality, this gives a little bit more of the technical specifications. I'd be happy to go into greater detail or connect folks with some of the team at Intel if they have specific questions about any of that. Here's some more sort of background on the technical aspects of the sensor network. And then here as well. So this is the project study area that I referenced earlier. As you can see, we've got 3 different transit corridors that are used by both buses, cars, bikes, and pedestrians throughout. This also gives an idea of some of the existing air quality stations that are already in place that we're going to leverage for this, as well as some of the distributions of schools and greenways as well. So this is kind of an aerial view of how the project concept is going to play out. I referenced the PSU data portal. We also have TriMet, which is a transit agency, which is going to be working with us and looking at transit signal priority with their buses. Then the city of Portland, as I mentioned, already has a lot of the Bluetooth, fiber, and adaptive traffic control systems in place that will be connecting together with these resources for the experiments. In terms of this other project concept, this is in Northwest Portland. This gives you an idea of some of the work that Intel has already done with air quality sensors in another neighborhood in Portland, and we'll be leveraging a lot of this to help inform and improve upon the work that we're doing in the Southeast Powell experiment area. In terms of a project timeline, we're right now, as I mentioned, in the standardization and usage part of it. We're working with the City of Portland and PSU to integrate the 2 open data portals. And we have some more work to do that will continue even beyond the June report out and the initial experiment. We hope to create a platform that has some legs to it and helps to engage a broader constituency. In terms of audiences, this is where I'll pause for a minute to go into some more detail about how we're leveraging the technology community and developers. We have a new program that we've created that we'll be announcing later today called the Oregon Tech Brigade, which is taking commitments from tech companies and volunteer time from their employees and matching those folks up with students from the community as well as with projects that have been suggested from the local governments that relate to the Global City Smart Challenge experiment, and looking at ways that those project teams of volunteers can develop apps and also work to help standardize the data in ways that can create some of these visualizations and applications that are going to be impactful for folks in the community so that they can actually look at ways that they're better informed making their commute decisions. In terms of another sort of constituency that we're looking at in terms of partners, we've been talking with San Jose, where Intel's already done work with air quality sensors, Phoenix, Chicago, and we've also gotten involved since the workshop in this fall with the Horizon 2020 project, which includes Barcelona, London, and Amsterdam, and they're looking specifically at air quality and active forms of transit, so there's a corollary project here. Finally, we're also looking at Glasgow because IBI has done a lot of smart city work there, especially around air quality, and so we're going to be learning a bit from that project, what worked, what didn't, as we move forward into the experimentation phase. Beyond the Tech Brigade, we're also leveraging a local project called the Open Bike Initiative, which is an open source hardware and software bike sharing program that's been created here. And we're going to be retrofitting some of the bikes to include air quality sensors so we can run those through the experiment area along with the sensors on buses to do readings as well and see how air quality could impact some of the bike routes as well. And finally, we also have a Mayor's Innovation Fund that was launched. It's about $1 million to spur innovative projects within the city. And we also have an early adopter program that we'll be launching with the Portland Development Commission with an IGA focused on funding for smart transit projects. So it's a way to get startups more involved in developing new and interesting applications for this network. We're looking for partners on the data and analytics phase, which is where we are now. And this just gives you a quick overview of the team structure. We've got several sub-teams that each are focusing on a variety of different component parts, data implementation, as well as the sensor network and hardware deployment. And with that, I will conclude.
Thanks, Gab. Yeah, let's keep on this slide for a second and just have a couple of follow-up questions before we move on, because there's a lot of great stuff. And we can dive into a little bit more later, but just to kind of step back and think, there's a lot of people here, there's a lot of partners here that you mentioned who are involved in different capacities. And one of the hard things about IoT in general is just that it is an ecosystem, and there are so many different partner groups to consider. How do you? So I think this slide kind of helps break down those categories in terms of what types of partners focus on what aspects of the project, whether it's the hardware software piece, or whether it's the data collection and analysis piece, and more of the organizing team piece as well. Is there another kind of lens in which you look at partners other than sort of this particular team structure? You mentioned Intel is sort of there as part of data collection and visualization analysis, but you kind of, when you were forming the team initially, how have you sort of thought about and categorized what partners you need, and how has that changed and kind of evolved to this? Or can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as we've delved into some of the details of the project and looking at some of the challenges that we might face, what was interesting about it was the technology problems were probably the least challenging. And the ones that quickly came to the fore as potential roadblocks that were significant were more people or sort of organizational problems. In other words, how do we effectively create collaboration between a variety of local governments with overlapping jurisdictions and responsibilities over some of the assets and infrastructure that exist as part of the test bed. And so we've been trying as much as possible to leverage existing agreements between some of these governments, especially around data sharing and collection, and then also access to physical infrastructure for purposes of deploying the sensors. And I think that's been probably one of the more interesting sticky points to this is, and learnings for us is that the most amount of time involved has been focused on kind of trust building and information sharing between the various actors on the public sector side. Often they don't talk with one another, and they haven't collaborated necessarily in the past on projects such as this. So for us, what was intriguing was bringing in the private sector, which represented an interesting constituency for them that provided a carrot to kind of get greater engagement and sort of provide an overarching win for the elected sponsors, because then they're looking at the fact that they can create some community building and something that's going to create momentum beyond just this short-term experiment in terms of, now we have the tech industry that's interested in, and with schools as well, with students participating in these projects longer term and building an infrastructure and ecosystem around what is initially this very narrowly defined project. If you take it to a high level, we're looking at neighborhood performance metrics ultimately, and that is something that we've used to sell this within the city to people who are policymakers and elected officials, saying, okay, what's the big picture goal of this? It's actually creating behavior change by using technology and data as an infrastructure at a broad scale. And if we empower citizens with more information within their neighborhoods at a hyper-local level, we can create big impacts that reduce climate or impact climate change goals like air quality improvement and reduce congestion. And those are two big pain points that the city often hears from constituents in terms of complaints. So we're tackling some pain points for people within City Hall, and that's an important part for how we're getting support for this. And then also I'll just say that in terms of the implementation and deployment, we really just initially looked at where does the expertise lie, and where we had partners do successful projects in the past where they can leverage some of that knowledge to move fast on this particular project.
So many of the partners on this team, you're saying you've been engaged with previously, and that's helped you once you've overcome the long pole in the tent, which was the building public trust and kind of bringing the public sector on board. You were able to kind of move quickly because you already had those relationships on the technology side. Is that kind of what you're saying here?
Yeah, exactly. It was looking at ways that we could speed up a process that might otherwise take 6 or 9 months in and of itself just to kind of get the buy-in that we needed. It was, okay, where do we already have existing either agreements or really good personal relationships with some of the key decision makers, and how do we get all those right people in this project team so that we can move as fast as possible.
Great. All right, we'll definitely dive in a little more in a few minutes. One point of clarification just before we go on to Kamesh, but the Mayor's Innovation Fund that you mentioned, was that is that directly supporting this effort, or is that more of another initiative that might help provide incentive for other innovators to partner with you down the road?
It's a little bit of both. It was an initiative that launched a little over a year ago, and it's now been built into the budget process, so it's going to be ongoing for the next few years. And what we've done is we've incorporated an agreement that was in process related to the Innovation Fund between the Development Commission and the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and built into it a requirement that there be some funding available from the Bureau of Transportation for innovative projects funded by the fund that focus on smart, intelligent transit. So it allowed us to sync that initiative up with this particular opportunity, so that we do have some incentives for companies to develop some solutions, most likely on the data and application side.
Got it. Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I will, I'll grab the screen back here from you for a second and then hand it off to Dr. Kamesh Nah Midori for give a brief introduction to him. So Dr. Kamesh Nah Midori is an associate professor of electrical engineering in the University of North Texas. But he started his career in the private sector, working with telecommunications firms in India and the U.S. And in India, he participated in the development of the first indigenous digital exchange, exciting. And then when he moved to Tampa, Florida, and he worked in the telecom provider, became Verizon there, in the design and development of the mobile telephone fraud detection system they used. Then he moved to academics after receiving his PhD in computer science and engineering from the University of South Florida, and worked as a research scientist in the Center for Theoretical Studies of Physical Systems at Clark Atlanta University, and was a faculty member at Wichita State University before moving to the University of North Texas today. So, Kamesh, I'm going to hand off the screen to you now.
Sure.
All right. Great. The floor is yours. Thanks so much.
So, are you able to see Adam?
Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank MIST and US Ignite for organizing this wonderful event. I'm with the Electrical Engineering Department at the University of North Texas. My colleagues, Sudha Arlikati and Simon Andrew, they are with the Public Administration Department. They have significant number of years of experience in emergency management program, and they also work with the city of Denton. So that's the value that we're going to add to the project. So this project deals with public safety and disaster preparedness, and the goal is to integrate an aerial base station with the city's emergency communication grid. So the objective is to come up with a model that can be used by other smart cities as well. So it's a collaborative project with the government, industry, and volunteer organizations. At present, the City of Denton's fire department, which also hosts the emergency management program, is with us. They are working with us. They conduct emergency drills in the city, and in future we would like them to, or they will be using unmanned aerial vehicles or aerial base stations to enhance the disaster preparedness in future. And then the second organization is called Civil Air Patrol. We have a division in Denton. It's actually started after World War II. It's a volunteer organization, and what they do is they provide flight services as a voluntary service during the disaster recovery times. At present, I'm in discussion with two companies. One company is in the aviation industry, and the other one is in telecom. Once we have a formal agreement, they hopefully by the time we go to the tech job, they will be part of our team. So I will give a big picture first. So imagine a scenario, a disaster scenario, where people are not able to use their cell phones. That could be because of floods or tornadoes, and then maybe the nearby cell site not functioning, maybe because of power failure and other reasons. Typically what happens is, in a disaster scenario, the first responders arrive in the scene and they look for people, victims. Suppose some people are stuck in some basements or in other places where the cell phone is not working. I'm assuming let's assume that the cell phone has the power or battery, but they're not able to reach outside because of the cell site is not functioning. Then it would be ideal if we can provide the connectivity. If we can take care of the connectivity problem, then in addition to first responders looking for people, the citizens or people can also look for connect to other people outside world. So that is what we want to bridge. It's a long-term project. It goes beyond this year's competition or this year's challenge project. However, we modularize this program into 3 phases. In the first phase, we want to come up with a demo, proof of concept, just with access points. And the second level, the second phase, we would like to go make it, scale it up with an aerial base station. So when I say aerial base station, it's like a cell station in the air supported by unmanned vehicles. And then use multiple access points. And the third phase is very significant, and it takes a longer time because the technologies are not yet ready. So that is to integrate the system with the city's emergency grid. So during the June demonstrations, probably will be between 1 and 2, phase 1 and 2, we will be able to show the results, our results, show a demo based on our phase 1, and then phase 2 will be ongoing during that time. So, so this picture shows a typical scenario. Let's assume that the nearest cell tower is not working, and people are trying to reach outside their area. So in this case, we can lift a broadband router with the help of UAV, and then try to use this as a bridge between the citizens and the nearest cell tower that is functioning. So in addition to the UAV, we could also deploy several base stations, several access points actually, near the buildings or on rooftops or balconies. We could also use balloons actually. So that would be even in addition to the unmanned vehicles. So we can deploy as many access points as possible, so that people can reach out to the outside world quickly. So this is our first stage. And there are several questions. I'm going to list all these research questions at the end of the presentation. So to begin with, what type of UAV we need? Should it be a drone, or should it be a quadcopter type of drone, or is it to be a winged aircraft? So these are the things that we are looking at right now. In the second stage, which is more extended version, we would like to lift the base station itself. Base station is something like a complete cellular station. It could weigh, the smallest base station could weigh something like 50 pounds or more. So once you have the base station in the air, once again with the help of UAV, then we can have several access points. They act like a bridge between, access point acts like a bridge between people's mobile devices to the aerial base station, and the aerial station serves like a replacement for the actual cell tower. So this is the scenario where basically we're trying to provide, using the Wi-Fi on one end, we are reaching out to people, even though the cellular phone is not working. For example, you can remove the SIM and still be able to use Wi-Fi to make calls to the outside world. In the third scenario, we would like to make it a complete system where we build a mobile command post with where citizens and everybody can communicate with everyone else, especially with the first responders. Currently, the big bottleneck is the first responders network is kind of a proprietary. They use proprietary devices, and it is very difficult to integrate with them. But as we speak, there are several organizations which are working toward developing sort of a gateway between cellular network and the emergency first responders network. So by that time, we will have a aerial base station with again a base station, a cellular station up in the air, and then people whose phones are not working because nearest cell site is not working, now they can reach the police or first responders, and first responders also should be able to reach out to citizens. So that requires a gateway between cellular network like LTE network and the first responders network. So there is a lot of work going on, and within the next few years, definitely these products will be available. So the one advantage of this aerial base station is being up in the air. The higher you go, the better coverage we have. For example, Department of Homeland Security and with the help of NIST and other private companies, they have used deployable communication platforms. In 2013, they tested one with some companies. Those balloons go all the way up like 60,000, 65,000 feet. However, with the emergence of this integration of unmanned vehicles with the civilian space, now it is time for us we could use UAVs, and this is a better option in terms of cost effectiveness as well as time to deploy. So for a Department of Homeland Security has come up with some sort of guidelines saying that we should be able to restore communications within 72 hours or earlier, but with unmanned vehicles we could make it much quicker. So for example, let's say within 3 to 4 hours we should be able to deploy an aerial base station that can achieve this objective. So currently we are looking for telecom companies as well as aviation companies which are working with the UAV, with designing the UAVs. The real research questions are here. With respect to unmanned aerial systems, we need to, all these studies, all this investigation is going to give us answers in terms of what should be the size, weight, and altitude and power requirement for the UAV. How long does it take to deploy? Because we would like to do it as soon as possible, but there are practical restrictions and considerations. And how long do we want to keep it in the air? For example, the small drones that we have, they won't last more than 30 minutes. And then finally, the regulatory constraints. On the cellular communication side, we are studying connectivity and coverage capabilities of base stations. Then again, to configure and deploy and make it ready to accept calls, we need to have an estimate of how much time it takes. And FCC considerations come into play. And finally, how does this system coexist with the first responders network? This is the most critical part, and this is the bottleneck, and this is what is going to take longer time. So by June, we will be able to show the first, and probably we'll keep continuing. I think we expect this project to go for at least a couple of years. Adam, can I pass it to you?
Great, thank you, Kamesh. That's great. It's really interesting. So this is kind of like a drone version of the, Google Loon project, where you're extending through unmanned aerial vehicles access, and especially in times of emergencies where you can deploy these during a critical time, and probably especially helpful in more like rural areas that find themselves disconnected in a disaster or tornadoes. This is a really interesting project.
Yes.
In terms of your partnerships, maybe I can just ask you a quick clarification question before we get back into the conversation. But how would you describe the interactions with these partners so far, and what did you do, or in what ways have you engaged them to kind of bring them into the project? And was that typical would you have done that without the Global City Teams push as part of your research naturally, or is this an outgrowth of being a part of this program?
Yeah, actually, we have been working on this idea for the past 2 years, but again, this challenge program has given more incentive. For example, a couple of years back, I went to a company and suggested this idea, and they thought, oh, it's not going to work out. It's not really viable. But at the last 2 years, several things are happening. One is the integration of unmanned vehicles in the civilian airspace. So that is national airspace. That is something that actually is the motivation for this. With respect to the fire department, they have been conducting these emergency drills at UNT there for the last several years. So we suggested this idea about a year ago, and they are willing to, they showed interest in working with us. So during this emergency drill, we'll create a mock situation like a tornado in a school area, and then the drill actually goes mimicking that scenario. So this is a natural fit. This unmanned aerial vehicle supported or UAV enabled aerial communication is a natural fit for this project. The second thing is civil air patrol. They are also locally they are local here, and it's a national organization, but we have a local branch. They, for example, when we want to deploy a base station, unless we have a right size and UAV with the right capabilities, we cannot really lift a base station because it's 50 pounds. So in the meantime, in the intermediate stages, civil airport patrol is going to help us by using manned flights. So it's always interesting. It's always good to try with a manned flight first. In fact, even safer mechanism is to try with the balloons, which we are doing right now. Just lift the access point with balloon. Small access point only weighs about 1 pound to 2 pounds, whereas the base station weighs about 50 pounds. So it makes sense to work with civil air patrol to using manned flights and see how the system works, and then think about unmanned vehicles. So this I've been working with these two organizations for past 2 years, but definitely this venue is giving us stronger motivation to pursue this project.
Thanks. All right, well, Skip, I'm going to unmute you now as well and open up a conversation about, I wanted to dive into the timelines a little bit because, you know, as Kamesh mentioned, this is an ongoing research project, very long-term in nature, and I think that's pretty typical for a lot of the research-based projects that are participating. And yours is also long-term in the sense that, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of long-term goals in terms of economic development, et cetera, that this is in coordination with. Can you talk a little bit about how the timeline of the Global City Teams Challenge plays into your broader vision, and has it helped in any way? And also just from the perspective of you laid out a timeline of feasibility and financing, going through some of those questions, going through some of the scoping questions, and now you're at a phase of securing commitments from the different partners. And maybe talk a little bit about that timeline, kind of dive into that piece of the timeline to help, I think, people who are a little bit newer or earlier stage as well in their projects understand like how long it kind of took. You already mentioned, you know, bringing the public sector on board was a big time commitment. But if you guys, would you expand a little bit on the broader timeline and where this fits in?
Sure. Yeah, so when we first learned about the workshop in late summer, and we started to convene some folks from public, academic, and private and nonprofit sectors to say, all right, is there an opportunity to leverage something that in part already exists? Because we knew that the timeline was going to be really fast. And some of these projects take years to kind of get to kind of full maturity. And so we looked at what the requirements were, what the expectations were over the first 6 to 9 months of the Global Smart Cities Challenge with the June report out. And what that did was it caused us to do two things. One, it caused all of us to, I think, kind of push the bounds of our usual kind of comfort zones in terms of timing. So it created a sense of urgency. So I think there were some real funding opportunities potentially down the road through some grants that are available with federal agencies, but also, more importantly, we saw an opportunity to bring together, in some cases, resources that were kind of moving on their own timeline and trajectory, but were already in place in some respects. So what it did was it allowed us to kind of say, all right, we've got this short-term opportunity. Let's all get together and think about ways that we can link up some of these existing resources. We then moved to identifying where are there gaps. And for us, what was critical is asking the question, can those gaps be filled in this 6 to 9 month time frame? And we were able to reach the conclusion that yes, in fact, when it comes to the congestion reduction outcome and then also the air quality testing, we thought that we could definitely get there within the time frame. As I mentioned, the health and wellness one may or may not fit within the June time frame, but that's okay. So I think for us it was being disciplined enough to say, okay, what's realistic? What's one or two things that we can focus on out of the gate that will be completed within that time? what are the existing assets that we can rely on. So I think that a program like this, what it does is it provides us with an incentive to move faster and to marshal together resources. I've found that when you're talking about public-private academic partnerships, oftentimes each is working on its own trajectory, its own timeline, and when you've got a requirement that there needs to be alignment and coordination, that is a nice incentive, frankly. So with regard to the timeline, I think it really helped. And the good thing about it, too, is that we've had a lot of support from the folks at US Ignite and from NIST and some of the White House fellows, and saying, okay, what do you guys need in the way of support? Can we help with connections to other communities or other partners that can provide input in this process? And so it's really kind of takes a globe or a world to kind of raise a village type of thing. And that's what's really powerful about what you guys have put together with this challenge, is the support network around it. It's not like we came to the table with all of our ducks in a row and everything completely baked. And being able to rely on that broader network was important with the quick timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some specific questions you don't think I've quite kind of spoken to? Because there were a few questions kind of in that single question that you asked.
Yeah, I tend to do that, lump 5 or 6. No, I think that definitely addresses it, and I guess the coming together of all these different timelines. I mean, would you say that you honed in on this sort of scope and were able to kind of move forward towards to where you are now, which is a little more stable set of partners who've all committed to be involved in very particular ways, and a use case that's fairly specific, and very specific sensors have been identified, and all of those pieces have kind of come together and gelled in a way at this point. And from September to now, kind of how long would you say that it kind of took to pull those pieces and those timelines and those partners together to find that you could do something feasibly by June and get into more of almost a project management rhythm, if you can even say that you've reached that point at this point, but it sounds like you are. That process, would it take 3 months? Is it still kind of happening?
Yeah, I'd say we're constantly learning as we go, and we're adapting. But I would say the initial assessment we had by probably mid-November or late November, we were saying, okay, is there enough here, and where are those gaps? So before the holidays, we convened a group of folks who were involved with the data and standardization part of it, and that was the final piece that we needed to say, all right, is there enough interest from City Hall and from PSU in kind of tackling this data and standardization challenge? Because if we can't get that piece, then we're left with a great collection mechanism, but no real ability to action upon the data that gets collected from it. And so for us, that was critical. We still have to execute on that, but at least getting the initial buy-in before the holidays was key. So that took 3 months to get to the point where we knew that each of the big component parts were in place. And now we're moving more onto the execution phase. And in terms of our we have weekly calls with various parts of the project teams. As you can see from my final slide, we have like roughly 4 different subgroups. And so we have each of them connecting with one another, and the project leads coordinate each of those activities. We then have a regular check-in with the project leads to make sure that everything is running smoothly and if we need to address anything. So there's coordination at 2 levels, both the tactical one with the subgroups and then strategically with the overall group. And in terms of outward outreach, we have 2 people. This isn't included on the slide, but we have a point person from PSU and then also from Intel who are doing work at really almost like a national or global scale in some cases with their day jobs. And so they've been also looking at partnerships and other resources that we could bring in as we've gone. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the US Ignite and sort of NIST connections have been helpful in that regard, too.
Great. I'm going to unmute everyone in the last few minutes that we have here, just to see if anyone has any questions. So if you find yourself with background noise, just feel free to mute yourself. But does anyone have in the audience here any questions they'd like to ask Skip or Mesh?
Hi, this is Abhishek from Vanderbilt University. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, thanks.
This question is for Skip, for the Tech Oregon team. So during the slides, actually, I noticed that towards the end of the slides, there was this potential for collaboration. So we are also working on actually setting up a team, and it's sort of in the early phases, but it's still being developed, and I think we are going to send out a request and basically a team registration as we go. But so what's the procedure? So if you want to actually reach out and seek out that, that there are some collaboration points. For example, we are also actually dealing with intelligent transit, but we are looking actually more about situational awareness and actually data analysis. While in the slides that I saw, there was a lot of sensors and infrastructure elements. So I think it will be an interesting idea to see if there's a scope, maybe not immediately for the demo, but later on if there's a scope for trying to merge or trying to seek out some collaboration points.
Yes, definitely. That would be great. And in fact, what I'd like to do is, if you want, you could email me, and I could find out when would be convenient to invite you in to participate with one of our project team calls. And that way, you could talk a little bit about your project, and we can sync up.
All right. Okay. I will email you, Skip. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Abhishek. And you can also, if you don't have his email, you can go to the US Ignite globalcityteams.org site and go to the Connected Intelligent Transit Action Cluster page and contact him through that directly. Or one of us can help introduce you as well if you send us your email.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, we've got a couple of minutes. I mean, there's so many questions I'd love to ask. Skip, you mentioned project management support from a few of the partners, kind of taking maybe the lead on some of the working group teams. Could you speak a little bit about who, of the partners that you have, maybe how many are committing sort of in-kind time versus other, like, do you have other cash resources to pay people to play those roles, or is it all in kind at this point? And sort of how many are would you say are real, I guess, strong contributing members in terms of donations of time or money versus sort of supportive partners but aren't necessarily kind of driving things? And is that a useful distinction?
It is. Yeah, I think it's important to have expectations up front. All the project leads are effectively donating their time because we've been able to align their participation with an incentive that aligns with what they need to be doing as their day job. So with private sector participation, Intel's been looking for a long time to kind of do more in its backyard. They have a huge facility here, and they've done work in San Jose and are looking to do more here. They've already got some air quality sensors, so to do this type of a project made a lot of sense. Same thing with IBI. They have an office here, and they've been doing work globally, and they wanted to do more in their own backyard. So this is a great opportunity for them to do that. So they're able to build relationships with the public sector here, which could lead to future business. So that's candidly kind of one of the opportunities. And then there's sources of funding from the federal level potentially and elsewhere that we've been tapping into in terms of like a long-term strategy of if we've got this thing done by June, how do we scale this in more neighborhoods across the city? Well, that's where that funding cycle potentially comes in and is of interest. So to answer your question, most people are doing it as part of either their daily responsibilities, so they've got the buy-off or buy-in to do that. Others are doing it pro bono because they're excited about the project and want to contribute some time to this.
And Kamesh, I mean, in terms of your project, it may be following more of a typical university research funded way. I mean, do you have postdocs or PhD students helping with project management and pull things pieces together, or are you the head guy running, making sure it's all moving forward at this point?
Actually, there are several students. Undergrad students, about half a dozen undergrad students that master's level students, so they are doing the actual the hands-on work. So
right. So they're funded by grants, but is there anybody like in terms of organizing and reaching out to the partners and maybe more on the like community organizing side of things, I guess. Is there anyone designated for that among the students, and are they paid as well through existing grants? Or?
At this point, I go and talk to the companies. For example, a couple of companies I'm discussing with two. One is in communications and one is on the aviation side. But for now, I'm doing that work, the liaison between the university and the outside work. The students are doing most of the hands-on work.
Great. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We've hit 1 o'clock, so I want to thank you both for your time and some of the insights that you've given to us and to the broader community, and I'm sure they will be very useful as people get started on new projects as well as move forward with their existing projects. So thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you guys, if not in February at the Tech Jam, then very soon. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.